G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today guys we're going to be going over the unstable stream that the Planetside 2 devs hosted a couple of days ago. We're going to focus on some of the key features and talking points that the devs really decided to focus on, and what it kind of means for the game in the future, and how I think it might actually impact the game for the long term. Anyway folks, we've got a lot to go through, so let's start getting straight into unpacking this live stream. Firstly, the unstable warp gates were the key part of the discussion of this stream, quite possibly the thing that they spent the most amount of time on. Unstable warp gates attempts to address the issue of continents seeing too little pop spread over such a large amount of land and territory, essentially. I'm sure we can all agree that we've had those downtimes on our server where the fight just really isn't happening. There's too many people fighting over too many lanes, thus causing just a bunch of ghost caps. And as I said before, the unstable warp gates mechanic attempts to fix this. Upon unlocking a continent, the continent will be limited to a few select lattice lanes for players to fight on. All territory that is blacked out on the map is completely out of play and cannot be captured by any faction, regardless of connection. This aims to lock players down to about 2 lattice links per faction to fight on, driving the fights more aggressively, which should result in less ghost capping. Yes, people do see ghost capping as a strategic advantage, but let's be honest, this is a first-person shooter, ghost capping is boring as batshit. Upon a certain time limit / player count being reached, not entirely sure which one the devs plan on following through with yet, if not both, they did address the plausibility of both being in the game, the continent will stabilize and open up for full-fledged warfare. All territories will become available. Now what this effectively does is sets the continent warfare up for 3 stages: unstable, stabilization, and meltdown. Meltdown obviously being the meltdown alerts that we have currently, giving the process behind locking a continent a little bit more structure that sees the war constantly grow in intensity before reaching a climaxing point. In the game currently, once you're thrusted onto a new continent, things just start off a bit chaotic with a whole bunch of ghost caps plaguing the battlefield. With this new system, however, the war consistently grows in scale. You start off on a few small skirmishes here and there, and then as the fight explodes, you begin to get into a more large-scale war, and then eventually the continent goes into full meltdown and it's an all-or-nothing fight. It just gives continent warfare this rising sense of tension that you sort of feel whenever you're fighting over a certain base. You know, as you get closer and closer to the cap, you might see more and more resistance showing up before the enemy tries to do their last-ditch assault. This will sort of be the thing here with these unstable warp gates. You know, it'll create this constant sense of the fight evolving, the fight getting bigger, and eventually hitting its climax point. Now, something I find personally really exciting about this entire system is how modular the developers have appeared to have made it. Rel made a key point about the current layout of the unstable warp gate stage being a work in progress, with the developers having the power to change which territories are locked and unlocked based on feedback from the community. On the back end, the developers have done a lot of work to ensure that this entire layout currently isn't set in stone and can be adjusted and tuned as per community feedback. Rel even highlighted that this system can be used to set up competitive events such as Lane Smash and Server Smash, which will be a huge help to organisers, because prior to this I believe they just ran around the continent ghost capping things for a couple of hours to set it all up. That will no longer be the case, so good times there. Anyway, keeping the ball rolling, Koltyr is also getting a major change as to how it operates and what its purpose actually is in the game. We all know that currently Koltyr is pretty deserted and isn't a great impression for new players. They jump in and there's no one fighting on Koltyr. What the hell's going on? Koltyr is now being evolved into what is being dubbed Koltyr VR, a new version of the Koltyr map that no longer has a level cap and has all items unlocked from the get-go for players to test, just like how the VR training room works currently. So on stream, the developers basically focused on this being a new VR training room that gives players who are stuck in constant queues something to do beyond, well, sitting in firing ranges shooting at stationary targets. Which is good, because this will help to populate Koltyr and give new players a good first impression. It also allows for new players to be thrusted into an environment where they have everything unlocked and they can start toying around with the customization of the game, so then they don't have to rely on external sources to figure out what they should be unlocking first. Really good change in my humble opinion. Now, while this actually eliminates a specific area for new players to dabble in, because you know, the BR120s that we all know and love will be able to jump into Koltyr now and potentially do some serious seal clubbing. The devs did address the new player experience and some of the things that they would like to do for that in the long term, and we'll touch on that in a few minutes here. Next up, the developers spent some time highlighting the fact that they are now incorporating new territories that encourage player-made bases. There are now new territories around each of the continents, besides Hossen, which the developers admitted is a complete and total mess right now, that feature a vehicle capture point in the middle of a field. That's basically it. The catch is, construction can be placed around this capture point. This is essentially the devs aiming to make construction a more integral part of the main game, as opposed to it being in bumfuck middle of nowhere harvesting Koltyr, which to me is fantastic. I've always loved the concept of the construction system and what it can do. Some of my best fights I've ever had in Planetside 2 have been with the construction system in play. However, just to me right now, it feels as though it's far too way out of the game. Currently, there are no bases in the game, despite Zikin and Biolab on Amaresh, that allow for construction to actually affect the capture of a territory. Now, this changes things, which really does open up a whole new challenge for capturing bases with these territories. You know, upon capturing these territories, do you build up quickly, or do you gradually build up defenses towards an enemy's base? Do you keep building walls upon walls and upon walls and try to cover them accordingly? You know, upon capturing these territories, you won't have a ready-made base with ready-made defenses that you would normally be able to rely on straight away for a counterattack. You know, in this case, you have to destroy an entire enemy base to get onto the capture point if it's built well, and then proceed to build up quickly to prepare for said counterattack. It's going to be a really interesting dynamic that's going to see a really different style of combat, I think. And I'm really keen for that sort of combat. Vehicles are now also going to play a much bigger part in the direct territory game here with these bases. Vehicles have always been, you know, just sitting off on a hill and shelling a spawn room. That's been their involvement in capturing most bases in this game as of late. However, with the emphasis on player-made bases and vehicle capture points, we may actually see vehicles taking a direct part in sieging bases and capturing them effectively. Now, besides the Doku LMGs that are arriving soon TM, that was essentially the general gist of what is mainly coming in the next major game update. The devs introduced a couple of new developers that have been recently added to the team, which is good in my mind. It means that the dev team is growing, it means that Planetside 2 is growing, and they've got more money to play with when it comes to adding more people onto the team, so that's a good sign, considering, you know, all the layoffs that happened to the team many years ago. The devs also touched on their roadmap for the long term, and it's fair to say that the developers haven't really been the best as of late when it comes to communicating their long-term plans, but the developers are planning to change that starting with this stream, focusing on bringing the player base a plan for the long term that gives players an idea as to what they can expect for the game and where it's going to be going. Of course, they address the new player experience. The guys over at DBG confirm that they are working on modular tutorials that allow new players to really get in and learn certain elements of the game at their own pace. There is also an emphasis on mentorship squads coming to the game. The developers really focused on pushing the idea of mentorship squads. How we're going to see them incorporate that effectively to provide enough incentive for experienced players to train up newer players, we'll soon see, hopefully. There was also talk of squad, platoon, and outfit improvements when it comes to UI for squad and platoons in particular, and progression. So we're going to see better progression for outfits. It's been something that's been requested time and time again by the community, and hopefully we'll see that come into play very shortly. The developers also wanted to address the meltdown alerts and how they aren't playing exactly how they wanted to as of late. Right now, meltdown alerts have turned into 2v1 clusterfucks. All it requires is two factions to swarm an enemy faction, and they're pretty much going to lose the alert unless it's in off-peak times, in which case the faction that's going for the capture might have a bit of a chance. Potential changes to the meltdown alerts include culling Koltyr requirements, placing a further emphasis on construction being a part of the main meta, or the main base capturing meta I should say, and changing the layout of the alert to avoid double teaming. There was talk of reintroducing the whole winner takes all style of alert that we were very used to before the meltdown alerts, but I'm not entirely sure if that'll mesh well with the whole concept of a meltdown alert, so we will have to see how that plays out in the future. This is all long-term stuff now that we've gotten into, but the developers were still open to discuss it, so thus here we are talking about it. Now, Bastion Fleet Carriers have also been getting a bit of a revamp behind the works. The devs have admitted that the current Bastion Fleet Carriers that appear above the continents right now as a part of the meltdown alerts are extremely rough, low poly models that are complete husks. They have no degree of detail on them. In fact, the devs have admitted to blurring the screen a little bit when you look up at the Bastion carriers to avoid the details being spotted out. That is being changed significantly. The guys over at DBG have actually recently commissioned a member of the community that has been contributing to the player studio for a very long time now to continue working on the Bastion Fleet Carrier model. The developers were kind enough to tease us with some screenshots, and oh my god, these things look amazing, I will say that much. But what they also hinted at is Bastion Fleet Carriers potentially becoming interactable in the near future, with the considering that they're actually getting a proper shell and they're not going to be a husk anymore, which would be pretty bloody cool, you know? Bastion Fleet Carriers finally making their way to the game. That would certainly turn the tide as to how the air game is played, and it would add a whole new layer to this game. I really do hope it is something that comes to fruition. Anyway guys, that is going to pretty much wrap up today's video. That kind of wraps up everything that happened in the Unstable Planetside 2 stream, the first stream of 2018 from the Planetside 2 devs, and it was a good one, guys. There was a lot of content here, and I really do hope to see the devs of Planetside 2 continue to update the community in this way. It's a good way to get the community involved, and it's a great way to continue updating us with what they are working on. Guys, if you enjoyed today's video, then a backhanding of that like button would be greatly appreciated. Say you find yourself backhanding that like button and you are new to the channel, then a backhanding of that subscribe button will also be greatly appreciated. Let me know what you thought of the live stream. Do you think it was a good stream, a bad stream? Did you like what was talked about in the stream? Let me know, guys, in the comment section down below. Once again, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Have a good day.